Hello, everyone. Rhys, T for Tiller, back with Jeff Collins. I was going to set it up. Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics podcast. Jeff Collins, number ball team, is on our guest list today. Jeff, how goes it?
It's going well. Nice. We're recording this on a Tuesday, so there's for me kind of a break in the action right now. I've been doing a bunch of baseball, basketball, football, and trying to when they're all going on at the same time, just always having something to do. And this is I don't know. It feels like the first kind of day off I've had.
Yeah, it's a weekend on a Tuesday, huh?
Yeah, that's how it
But
works for me.
now, tomorrow, you're going to start doing the NBA stuff with the NBA draft.
Yeah, so I haven't even really looked at the college kids yet. I usually don't even look at them until they land on a team, and then I dive in super hard. So I'm kind of gonna be in for a surprise tomorrow. I'm a Warriors fan, so they've got an early pick. I know they're trying to trade it, but yeah, whoever they pick, I'm not really gonna have a super strong opinion on. It's gonna be weird.
But if I'm any team in there, I'm drafting the Obi guy from Dayton because he took a non-Power 5 conference undefeated and made them a number one seed.
Yeah. But
Wow,
anyway,
I would take a winner over better player. That's the argument for Tom Brady over Peyton Manning.
Oh, no. Reese is a Broncos fan. So you see, we're already spirited, Jeff. This is how it goes all the time. A lot of bouncing back and forth. So, Jeff, we appreciate you coming on. We touched base. We followed each other in the past. Touched base after the young lad wrote a book this last spring, and I appreciate your support, trying to help him get the word out. He gets to put money away in his savings and college, and so we appreciate the support.
yeah, it's awesome, man. I got to check out the book, and it's just like, man, there's no way kid in high school wrote this. It's just so processed and everything. It's just like step by step, and it's like he knew what he was doing. It was pretty impressive.
I had his help plus Grammarly.
Plus Grammarly. But the funny part about it is he hadn't even started high school at that point. He was just starting ninth grade. He was in eighth grade. COVID hit and sent the kids home, and
Got bored.
he got bored. So he's like, "All right, what am I going to do?" And he's making some notes, and we are like, "All right, let's try to put this into a book format." And
Making a cohesive theme.
tried. And so then we've had these podcasts every week with different guys who you're friends as well, like Scott Barrett, Graham Barfield, Rich Rebar, Nick Whalen, Ryan McDowell, Shane Hallam,
Jeff Hasley, Mike Clay,
Yeah.
Matt Harmon.
Heath Cummins. Anyway, those guys are all great guys. So they're all like formative in his brain. So no pressure. Yeah, we even had Chris Allen. Chris Allen's a really sharp guy. I don't know if you know him, but
No, almost all the guys that you talked about there. That's a pretty impressive list. I don't know if I could get all those guests to come on my pod,
can.
so that's impressive.
You're big time, man. I'm one of the OGs in this world. What's funny is if I turn the camera to my right, I have somewhere I was writing for magazines in '07 and started writing in doesn't mean it's, you kind of lose the flavor after a while. So let's get started.
How'd you get started writing, doing the DFS, analyzing numbers for a living, essentially?
How did I get started? Was that the question?
Yes.
So man, my story's kind of weird. I was just working in restaurants at the time and knew that for a while that is kind of what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to be a Gordon Ramsay type or something, like I
Right.
fell in love with that idea and hey, this is going to be my thing. And then I just fell out of love with it. And I was just trying to think of what can I do to make a career, being that my whole philosophy is to just do something that you love. And I've always long loved sports, and decided that in the middle of like playing fantasy with friends and everything, and realizing that I was pretty good at that, which is not that hard to be good at. That maybe I should do something in the fantasy sports space. And let's see, this was around the NFL lockout or whatever. And at that point, it seems crazy to think about now, but there was talk conversation that maybe the NFL just isn't going to be a thing anymore. And I was like, no, that's ridiculous. Of course, like they're going to find a way to make this work. Football's going to, still be a thing. That's crazy. And I just tried to find a way to bet on that. Like, how can I take advantage of everyone being afraid of this idea that it might not exist anymore? So I bought a business that is basically running a bunch of fantasy football leagues, like dynasty fantasy football leagues. And that's kind of how I got in. And I was tweeting about those one day, and someone that was trying to start up a DFS company like to compete with FanDuel and DraftKings. I don't even think they'd launched yet, but it was right around there. They contacted me. They saw me tweeting about regular season fantasy football stuff, and like, hey, would you be interested in doing some content for us? We're trying to integrate content into doing DFS also. And so that's just kind of how it all started. I got into it just deciding one day that I'm going to do something that I love to do. Not sure if I'm going to make money on it, but look for an opportunity to just really buy in on the fact that I thought the NFL was still going to be a thing.
Oh, man. So what's your favorite sport then? To play or to watch?
The only sport I played in high school was basketball. And I coached later after I graduated. And that's always kind of been my thing. I was a ball boy for the Golden State Warriors for a little while. That was a lot of fun. I had season tickets to the Warriors for a while. This was when they were really bad, of course. It was when I was younger. Hadn't made the playoffs in 10 years or something. So a lot of bad teams. I would have to say it's basketball for me. It's the best sport to watch in person. Football, I don't like watching in person at all. Baseball, I like, but doesn't compare to basketball, in my opinion, if you have good seats. And it's just always been a game of mine that I like playing and stuff too.
How about fantasy? Which one's your favorite fantasy?
I always feel like it's whatever one the season we're in, just because that's, recency bias is a thing.
Oh, yeah.
You just whatever's in the moment, you think that that's your favorite. And it feels like, again, football's my favorite. But I think that is actually true. Just going back and looking at my history and everything, that's where I've had the most success. That and baseball's pretty close to it. But it's weird. Probably not that I'm necessarily bad at fantasy basketball, but that's probably my worst of the three, even though I like it the most.
The one thing, two questions following up on you. 2018 was a pretty good year for you, wasn't it, on DFS?
Yes. 2018, I got really lucky. But it was just a crazy run of events, just all consecutive after the other. I started off, I won fantasy baseball live final. That was $500,000, and I was like, wow, how could I ever top this? Right? It was crazy. But then it's 2 months later after that, after I'd won that one, I was at another live final for fantasy football this time. And I was, along with the live final, like that's one contest, and I could win up to, I think it was 500,000 in that one again. And then I was just playing normal DFS and like the Millie Maker type contest and everything. It just so happened that on the same day that I was at the live final, which I finished second place in and almost won, it was like a catch away from winning. I also won the Millionaire Maker on FanDuel. They don't call it that. It was like the fan championship or something is what they called it. So I won 1.2 million after that. And then there's the fantasy basketball final after that. And I finished second in that one. So first, second, and then just another $1 million on the side. It's obviously a ton of luck involved in that.
Two things there that make me chuckle. First, makes you want to move out of California with those kind of taxes and that kind of cash, I'm sure.
I was in Nashville, luckily.
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
Just one of those things. Also, here's what I know about every DFS guy with the big, pulling down something big. You remember the one you came in second, missed by a catch. I bet you remember the play.
Oh, yeah. Well, this one was crazy because I actually won the $1 million on a stat correction.
Oh, wow.
So the contest ended, and I was in second place. And I was watching the games the entire time, and it was all in the Seattle. I think it was the Seattle game. Mike Davis was on Seattle a couple years ago, right? So Mike Davis, backup running back on Seattle. I want to say it was Mike Davis. I'm blanking on who it was.
Rashad Penny.
Mike
Might have been
Robinson
Penny.
or Michael Rob.
I don't know, but so there was the backup was in, and they gave the starter the catch, and I saw it happen. I was like, wait a minute, they gave the guy the catch, and he wasn't even in the game, and that's when I got passed, and I was like, I shouldn't have got passed right there. And asking people, it's like an event, and everyone's like, having a good time, and like almost everyone's out of it by then, right? So they're hardly paying attention, they're just talking to each other, socializing. I'm like trying to find someone to confirm what I just saw so that I felt like I wasn't crazy, and no one knew. And I was like, guys, I swear to you that they gave the catch to the wrong person, and everyone just thought I was, I don't know, being a poor loser or something, or just not accepting it. But eventually they got that fixed. But that was like the most stressful time of my life, because going like, no, we cannot pay out the contest yet. This would be, this is going to be a huge deal. And so yeah, that was the main thing that I was concerned about at the end there. I think it was Julian Edelman was the catch that passed me in the live final.
Wow. I just know everybody remembers because it's ingrained. Because there are people that go their whole lives not making the difference between first and second place in those contests. What else you got?
So you mentioned how you started with number ball. That was the site that they approached you about?
It wasn't, but when I started number ball was basically after all of this stuff. Like once
Wow.
I had that huge run, I was working for some other companies over the years, and I actually thought I was just going to stop doing content, and then I had stopped. It'd been a couple weeks. I'm like, I'm not going to stop it. Like I can't just retire or something. I'm going to still do content. So I started my own site.
That's awesome. So your site does pretty well, right?
Yeah, we've done pretty well. Been pretty lucky there. Also, yeah, we've had a lot of subscribers with success, and it's been a good time.
I just remember a tweet in the last couple of weeks, somebody challenging you, and you're like, we've had some people in the final.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into details, but that was the gist of it, right?
Yeah, we had so the first season that we launched the site, it was baseball season, and that's, I think, what everyone considers my best sport. Like that's where I get pretty deep into like pitch movement and velocity and all this kind of nerdy stuff. And there's a FanDuel live final, which I'm coming off this run of live finals, so everyone of course wants to try it too if they're taking my advice. And we had something like 23 subscribers make the live final of like 100 people or 80 people or however big the live final was. And it was just the craziest thing. So like once that many people qualified, it was actually in San Diego. We just threw a party for our subscribers and stuff. And it was a really good time. And then maybe, let's see, once football season started, week 1 or week 2, we had someone win the Millie Makers on DraftKings. So it's just, again, a great run of luck that it was a lot of fun to be in the middle of.
And you're a young guy, man. You hope it lasts.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like, even if it doesn't, like, could I ever complain? If I got unlucky for the rest of my life, I think that I still ended up on the good end.
Oh,
we all wish we could make $1 million in a day
or a weekend, right?
You made over that in a weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know about this. Are they Fantasy Live? Are those contests? Is it winner take all, or
no? They're
the live finals.
Yes.
Yeah, they're tiered, but a lot of them they're pretty big drop offs. And especially the Millie Makers, the ones that aren't live, you can drop from $1 million to like 100,000 or 200,000. Yeah. And with these showdown slates, the one game slates, it's even worse because you have a bunch of people splitting because it's hard to have a unique lineup in a showdown contest. And yeah, there's some pretty heartbreaking bad beats where guys will lose $1 million on the quarterback taking a kneel down at the end of the game and getting negative however many points,
Oh yeah. And when he talks about splitting pots, it means, hey, we know that one of us is going to finish first and one of us is going to finish second. How about if we just we just both take 1.5. Right?
Well,
Each one of us.
you could do that. That's done a lot in poker and at live finals too. Some guys will be like, "Hey, do you want to chop and split winnings?" But in this case, I'm actually talking about people having the same lineups
Wow.
on accident because there's just so few combinations for a single game. And when that happens, you have the same lineup. You're splitting the prize money because you both tied. So instead of first place being $1 million, it's cut in half and it's 500,000 for each, or they get the second place also, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That just I didn't know because
you're 15. That's why you didn't know.
Yeah, you shouldn't know.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, your great success, what's your process to figure out avoids and targets on a weekly basis?
I would say a lot goes into it, of course, but the one thing that I'm known for is the crazy play, like the guy that no one else wanted to play because they thought he was a bad play, and not playing the guys that everyone likes. So it's not totally black and white, but a lot of times when in DFS, since you can have the same players, you're just drafting based on assigned salaries, right? And everyone wants to have Christian McCaffrey, and 50-60% of the entire contest is going to have Christian McCaffrey. It makes a lot more sense for me not to have Christian McCaffrey, not because I think that Christian McCaffrey isn't likely to do well, but because if he doesn't do well and when one of his games that he gets hurt or that he just they don't put up any points and he's not hugely involved in the game plan, which is rare, I'm just gonna benefit a lot from that, from not having him and from being past so many lineups that have him. So that's what I'm known for. It's just a really contrarian approach where I'm taking the off the wall guys and letting the popular plays be on my opponent's lineups.
Well, not only that, but not to be Captain Obvious, but the Christian McCaffrey owner will never win by himself. He'll always have the guy with Christian McCaffrey in his lineup will always have 200 of his closest friends there with him, right? Because they're all
for showdown, yeah, for sure. So yesterday I won a showdown contest for the Bears and Vikings game, and I posted my lineup ahead of time. I said this is going to be the winner, and just again got lucky and ended up being the winner. But as soon as I posted it, there's of course a ton of people commenting saying, "Oh, I can't believe you played this guy. You should have definitely played this guy." And it's just funny to see all that stuff play out. Like, I guarantee this guy's not going to be in the winning lineup. Everyone's got their opinions. They're just so dead on and set that when you think about things from probabilities from that perspective, it's just like you can just kind of have to laugh at it because it's like that's not true. What you're saying isn't true. And so yeah, I avoided some popular plays and took some off the wall guys. Took Cordero Patterson and ended up doing well and winning that contest.
The two things I heard from you, and this is every NFL fan that watches a pregame on a prime time knows this is true. When all the analysts like one side, the other side's going to win.
Look at last Sunday night. Every single analyst picked the Buccaneers, and they all lost by 35 points.
Right. It happens, and the crowd is wrong more than they're right. And do you disagree with that?
So there is some validity to like the crowd and consensus thinking. The best example of this is if you go to Carnival and they say guess the jelly beans in the jar. That's actually going to be pretty close. If you average everyone's guesses together, it'll be pretty close to what the jelly beans actually are. But the difference is from that and something like this is even if you're right, there's just no advantage for you being right because that's what everyone thinks. The advantage is if you can identify something that people don't think is going to happen and profit that way, right? It's just there's so much leverage you can create by taking the guy also that or if this guy doesn't do well, say it last night's a bad example, but say it's a wide receiver like Thielen and everyone loves Jefferson. So you take Thielen knowing that if Jefferson doesn't do well, Thielen probably will. Or you could do that. It's also really good with the run game versus pass game. Everyone loves
Right.
Dalvin Cook, so let me play Kirk Cousins. Because if one doesn't do well, the other likely is. Those sorts of things are what you want to try and identify. And it's not always just like, all right, let me just take the worst options every time. Like that's not what it is. But once you're weighing it versus the popularity and then compare, it's a lot of it's math, like figuring out what the actual probabilities are. That's where you can identify the edge.
Yeah, I just think if you took 100 people off of Twitter that's claimed they love fantasy football, their odds of being good or great are very slim. And people don't realize this is my view of the fantasy sports. You please push back on me if you disagree.
Okay.
That the basketball and baseball have the sharpest analysts because it's so analytical, where football has, since it's such a mass population, there's a little more inefficiency. That's why these people have such strong opinions saying, I know what's going to happen. And we laugh about it almost every week on here because there are people that are dead set that Chubb's better than Hunt, or which is one of your contrarian plays, right? If you play Hunt, everybody's on Chubb. But everybody's dead set on it. I'm like, guys, we're talking about probabilities. We're not talking about whether the sun's coming up tomorrow. We're talking about how hot it's going to be. Like let's put our pride aside.
Yeah, and it's event-based probabilities too, where since fantasy football is so dependent on touchdowns, it's like you can project opportunity really well and be pretty accurate with that sort of thing. But when your score can double based on who catches the touchdown, is a lot more difficult. Or especially when defenses get involved and the defense scores the most points, had 2 random fumbles that they took back for a touchdown. People just don't account for the volatility. It's like, sure, this is a medium projection, but what's the range of outcomes that is we're actually dealing with here, not only for this player, but how does that, if this happens with this player, how does that affect other players? And then you can look for correlations where it's like, all right, well, if this quarterback does well, if this receiver does well, his quarterback's probably also doing well. And you start to try and just maneuver your lineups that way, create your lineups with to have relationships within it.
Yeah,
that's a good thought. So for injuries, how long do you give a player once from when he gets injured to when he's back at 100%?
Basically, are you trusting McCaffrey his first week back? Are you trusting Breeze?
Are you trusting Eckler?
Yeah, so this is a really good question, and I would say the biggest edge right now in DFS, if I had to identify something, because these guys that are injured are never owned, and we saw it with Dalvin Cook when he came back, monster game, almost nobody played him in DFS, and so I have a rule about this too, where it's not even just related to injuries, but if an outcome that you're projecting, you think there's a lot of volatility to it. So in other words, with Dalvin Cook, if you're not sure how much he's even going to play, those are good plays generally when they're not popular, and they're really bad plays when they are popular. Dalvin Cook would have been really popular after the injury. That would have been something where I would have been making fun of people on Twitter if they were playing him, because it's too uncertain.
Right.
So that's my approach, is when there's a lot of uncertainty, I'm going to be on them when they are not popular. And I was on McCaffrey after the Cook week, after I reminded myself, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? I've got to play these guys.
Right. And I'm going to put words in your mouth and correct me, but I'm assuming that's not when there's a timeshare like Drake and Edmonds, Chubb and Hunt, where that pie now is potentially split. It's a lot easier to project when it's the bell cow kind of guy.
Exactly. So again, range of outcomes, when you can project just the upside to be so much higher, then that's totally different. I mean, if it's a timeshare situation where you think there's a chance that one guy could get all the work, that's different. But in a situation like we're talking about with Cook and McCaffrey, and you just know, like, if they're healthy, they're getting all the work. Like, there's no question about it. There's so much value in that.
Yeah, and just to give Rhys an idea, he's going to be shocked at this. When Drake was out the first week, everybody was on Edmonds. What was his? What percentage of people had him?
I want to say it's probably 25-30% owned. Yeah.
Which means there is very little. Those 25 to 30, they almost all had similar lineups, right? I mean, because
So the main slates don't have as much overlap as the showdowns where it's just one game, but
right,
yeah, that point can still stand if especially when it's guys that are related to each other. So a really popular um uh so like if Josh Allen is really popular and then Diggs is also popular, and then it's like, well, that those teams, if you're gonna play Josh Allen and Diggs and John Brown, there are going to be a lot of really similar lineups, because then all of a sudden everyone's looking at the same price points for the
yes,
rest of their roster spots, and it just becomes really easy to have similar builds. And it's not like you're necessarily going to run into an identical lineup when we're talking about the main slates, but you'll just run into a lot of overlap where it's a lot of 1 versus 1 in your lineup or 2 versus 2, and you just don't want to be in that situation. You want to your point, like have a lineup that is just very unique and isn't relying on trying to beat a bunch of 1v1s and 2v2s.
yes. And I will say the two surprising ones to me in terms of avoid, all right, avoid the Ravens. So right now, even in the season long, there's teams that I'm like, I don't really want very many pieces because they're already starting to fade. Yeah, we're getting at that time of the year where other than Robinson, Jacksonville doesn't have very many players I want, or I was looking at the Bears last night. I was thinking even A-Rob, I'm dropping in an ESPN league, right? Because T. Higgins is on the waiver wire, and I'd rather have T. Higgins. And all I'm saying is we're getting that time of year. And then you see guys that are ascending like Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, I think the fantasy community, I don't know about the DFS community, has yet to catch up on Herbert and Keenan Allen on, those two together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of times the bad chalk, the bad popular plays are from these teams that don't score any points. So
Right.
in DFS, a guy that was really popular at the beginning of the year was Logan Thomas. And
Yes.
it's like he was cheap and everything. That's why guys wanted him. He was getting a lot of targets. But the biggest mistake that people make with targets is that they give everyone the same quality of targets. And
Yeah.
11 targets from Aaron Rodgers to most people is the same as 11 targets from Dwayne Haskins, and it shouldn't be, because they're not equal.
Well, it's gonna be a lot more off target, right?
Exactly.
Among other things.
Exactly. And that's I think it should be an easy one to identify and be like, oh yeah, well, yeah, the targets aren't the same. And I joke with people that try to make a point about, oh well, this guy's going to get so many targets. I'm like, well, I don't play in a point per target league, so that doesn't matter to me. But the other one too is with ADOTs, you can identify the quality of a target, or the likelihood of a target turning into an actual catch. And you'll get guys with high ADOTs that have a lot of value when it comes to upside, but that are really volatile because those long targets. So like a Will Fuller type, more so last year for Will Fuller, but a guy that just went deep all the time. In those weeks that he's really popular and in a really good matchup, sometimes it's really good to fade the guy.
Yeah.
And maybe the most famous week in DFS history, all the smart people one week in last season said to fade Will Fuller because of this reason, this logic, in a really good matchup. He's cheap and everything. And that was a 3-4 touchdown game, whatever it was. Like,
Yeah.
I believe it was a 14 for 200 something yards and 3 touchdowns. He went bonkers against the Falcons. So what else is new?
But it was almost like MVS the last 2 weeks, right? MVS, I bet, I don't play DFS, but I bet this coming week, who the Packers play. I don't know, but people are going to be on MVS, right? He's got 3 touchdowns. People are going to be on. But Lazard's back. I mean, there's all this context and nuance that have to be factored in.
Exactly. And a lot of it's when you think about the relationships that they have to each other, it's where you can create leverage and think, all right, if everyone's going to use MVS, I can pivot to Lazard or Tunyon or whoever. And it's, even though that MVS is technically the better option, if people were to say that, I know that if he has a bad game, like, this offense is probably still putting up points, and it's probably going somewhere else if it didn't go to him. So you can just look at those relationships and figure out how to not only give yourself one advantage, but it's two birds with one stone, right? That's how I like to think of leverage. If one thing happens in your favor, how can I double down on that and make it an even bigger advantage?
1 + 1 = 3. When I was thinking of the ones that disappoint, that are the cheap chalk plays, like Gio the last couple of weeks, right? Everybody's been on him, but there's no way he's a game winner.
Joshua Kelly for earlier in the season whenever Eckler went down.
Yep.
So in those situations, again, so Gio actually did well for DFS the first week that he filled in. Yeah. And I told everyone to not play him. My reasoning was that look at what Joe Mixon did in that offense. And Joe Mixon, we have to assume, is better and more likely to do well in that offense. He had, I don't know, one game over 13 fantasy points or something. So you're telling me that that's the upside for Gio Bernard? That's just a bad play. It ended up working out that first week, but yeah, we're seeing Gio more disappoint in the last couple weeks. So yeah, I think with bad offenses, I'm generally okay with fading those guys.
Yeah, just because there's no upside on a team that doesn't score touchdowns. I don't mean that badly. I just mean, how many touchdowns do you expect the Bengals to score against the Steelers?
Yeah, exactly. And the one thing about them is they pass a ton. Like, there's so much pass volume. But another edge is knowing to avoid the teams where you can't project where those targets are going to go. Because in DFS, you stack. You take a quarterback and you take one or two of his receivers. The Bengals, since it's so spread out, like, sometimes it goes to T. Higgins. We saw AJ Green have a big week. Like, that's tough. Where it's easy are situations like Green Bay, where you can just pair him with Devontae Adams, or like Minnesota, where it can be Thielen and Jefferson, or one or the other. At least one of those guys is going off. Cincinnati, I would never bet on any one of those guys or any one of the two of the guys going off. It's just much more hard to project.
Fool's errand.
Well, with the premium knowledge that Number Ball has, how do you know which wide receiver trio or duo will pop off, like for the Buccaneers, Cowboys, or even the Steelers now that Claypool's emerged?
So I have what are called stack ratings that I created over the off season, where I was just it was to the point where I'm like, all right, how can I just automate a lot of what I do on a regular basis? Because once you can automate something, time is your biggest weapon in DFS and everything. Because the more you can research, the more you can rely on someone else for, like, for instance, the optimal thing to do if time wasn't limited would be to watch every game film and be able to have an understanding of everything for every game. But if you can instead rely on Cosell to tell you what he thinks about the game film, a guy who's been doing it his entire life, that saves you a ton of time. You can move on to the next thing. So I try to do that with everything I do. And one of the things that I did this season were stack ratings. And what goes into those are, number one, you want to find the teams that are going to score a lot, right? Which I've already talked about. You probably could have guessed that. It also factors in the percentage of targets that the player is projected to get from the quarterback. It factors in some other things too, like average depth of target and those sort of things. But you get everyone down to a rating where it's like, all right, well, the best stack of the week, if you're just going to pair one quarterback with one receiver, is Rodgers and Devontae Adams. The best stack of the week, if you're going to use two guys, is Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Ridley. And then you've got an entire list of every possible combination with a rating of 1 to 100 of how strong that connection is. And I couldn't have done that 2-3 years ago, but when you just continue to try and figure out how can I automate more things that I do and get my point of view of the slate into an actual number, That's number one, valuable for me, but
Yeah.
number two, valuable in being able to share that with subscribers and let them know, hey, look, this is exactly what, instead of asking me what do you think of this stack, right? We have what, close to 10,000 subscribers overall. They all want to ask me, hey, what do you think of this combo? It's like, you don't even have to ask me, just go look. Like, it has it right there, and it's really accessible, which is one of the things we're trying to do.
Yeah, because the one thing, so I live in the world of IT, and the one thing that most people struggle with is getting it out of their head and onto a screen in some kind of digestible manner. So one thing that I want to say is kind of embedded in Rhys's question there was, how do you know, well, all right, how much do you factor in? Let's take the Seahawks this last week, that Jalen Ramsey's going to be on Metcalf, so I should pivot to Lockett or stay away entirely.
Generally, I'm going to be factoring in the matchups less than the field will.
Okay.
Is how I'd like to phrase that. I think the general public is aware of, in DFS anyway, the guys that are in bad perceived matchups. So those are usually the guys I'm going to play. Like last week I didn't have much Metcalf, I don't think, but 2 weeks ago I did when he had the big game. It's in that situation when it's so close, especially at the beginning of the year, it seems so close. I just always am taking the guy that's less popular, because if it's a 52-48 probability between the two who's going to outscore the each other, but the actual differences in ownership is like 25% to 5%. I'm taking the 5% owned guy. That's just really simple math. So for me, when it comes to analyzing the matchups of it all and everything, it's just I'm like, I don't know the exact number to quantify it, but 80-90% of my analysis is in the offense and not the defense.
So what I heard you say was you believe more in the player and the player talent versus the matchup.
Yeah, because especially for football, because it's so schemed, where even in the matchups that you would think, all right, Jalen Ramsey is going to shut DK Metcalf down, which is this last week he pretty much did. They could have approached it totally differently. I'm pretty sure Ramsey even said in interviews that he wasn't going to be shadowing Metcalf or anything, which, I told people, I was like, I don't know whether to trust this or not. He could absolutely be lying. Why would he tell the truth? But the coach can also, and we've seen this plenty of times before, put Jalen Ramsey on the receiver that they think is worse, and then double team the guy that they think is better. And it's just like, when there's so many different things you can do and you have no idea how the team's going to do it, why complicate things? Take the better guy.
Yeah, and that happened with Darrelle Revis.
Yeah, that's what else brought bringing up. And also, you talked about matchups. In week 2, everybody was all off on DK because he drew the Stephon Gilmore matchup.
And he wore him out.
And he wore out Gilmore because what was not known then was Gilmore can't cover big receivers as well. That's why Devontae Parker looked well in week 7 and the week 17 the year before. And so with DK Metcalf able to outmaneuver Gilmore a lot of times, especially on that deep touchdown.
Yeah. Hey, the one thing piling onto that, I was going to say, Jeff, is I'm not a DFS guy, but I think Metcalf's going to have a monster week this week, because I always like the guys that throw a junk game in. Lockett nicked his knee late in the game. It's not getting very much publicity.
Lockett never does.
Yeah, but I mean, he got hurt late. I think Metcalf's going to have a huge game.
I think that he has a good chance of being a really good, one of the best wide receivers ever, essentially. I mean, I don't want to get into too much hyperbole, but he's just got all the physical skills, and he's now in an offense that is throwing more than any other team, basically. I think it's only the Bills right now in situations that are neutral that are throwing more. But it's just like he's set up so perfectly to have the skills he has and the volume that he's going to have. And I would, any week that he's playing, I wouldn't be shocked if he has the best score.
Yeah, I just meant the recency bias, him coming off of a bad game. everybody's going to be like, oh no, or they watched AJ Brown drop that pass last Thursday night against, and everybody's like, oh, I remember that. And
you're touching on like one of the biggest things that it's easy to take advantage of. Recency bias in DFS, where everyone's just overreacting to super small sample sizes, and again, like event-based scoring, where it's like, guy caught 3 touchdowns and he's super popular next week, where if you remove the touchdowns, which, I mean, that's hard to do, but it's not that good of a play, so it's recency bias. If you can identify situations where it's like, wait a minute, this guy's getting way too much credit because this aspect of his performance last week is unlikely to be repeated.
So much of DFS is based off of the 65 plays the previous week. 65 plays is not near enough sample size, not especially when your team's on the field 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and that's all you can watch.
And then the next play, all those variables. So like Wayne Gallman, right? Wayne Gallman, horrible, but scores 2 touchdowns, and everybody loves him now. And he's still horrible, right? Yeah. What other questions you got for him?
So I'm gonna move on to like individual matchups. With Rhys out, do you expect any change in play calling or workloads for any of the other Saints?
I haven't actually looked into it much yet, being that it's Tuesday, and I mean, Peyton said that he's not even announcing a starter. I imagine it'll be Winston. Why else would you sign the guy? But
right.
But yeah, I think that it just goes back to what I was talking about with McCaffrey, where since it's so uncertain, if he's going to catch some steam and everyone's going to want to play Winston, I'm going to be off that situation because I can't project with confidence exactly what that game plan is going to be, and I'll be looking for ways to leverage that. So if it's going to be Michael Thomas and Winston that are super popular, I'll probably be on Kamara if I think the Saints have a good chance of continuing to score, or I might just be off it completely and betting on hopefully Winston looking as bad as he did when he came in relief.
Well, they are playing the Falcons though, so they have a very, very easy matchup.
But to Jeff's point, here, Jeff, you tell me I'm wrong on this. So if everybody's on Winston and Thomas, he may say, I'm going to let you have them. I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to bet on a high-scoring game, and I'm going to take Ryan, Julio, and Ridley and bet on it being an 80-79 game, and you can figure out how the Saints are going to score.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to the correlation with teams in the same game, the opposing teams. So a lot of times with stacks, if I am taking a quarterback and a wide receiver, and it's Brian and Julio or Ryan, Julio, and Ridley, I am almost always looking to try and take someone on the other team because, like you said, if it's 80, 79, 80, or 40 to 47, obviously you got other guys on the other team are going to score. So I'm going to need one of those guys. So yeah, that's how I would look at it. But I would still try to, most likely, if I projected it to be uncertain, be on the guys that no one else wanted.
How much does the Vegas implied total and over under go into that high scoring thought process?
A ton. I think it's very valuable. You can get a lot from it, and not only the total but the line, and just knowing, all right, this team's favored by a touchdown. You can identify things that aren't being looked at. You can look at play call tendencies based on teams that they're trailing. Here's how often they pass. Here's how often they run. And when you can input that into your projections instead of their season averages for play calling, it's just going to shift your projections a lot different than what the field is going to be looking at. And you can think about, okay, well, this is what happens in a situation where the Seahawks have the lead. They're still going to pass 60% of the time or 58% of the time. If I'm going to capture as much upside as possible, maybe I want that team that even if they have the lead, they're still passing a ton. So those are the sorts of things I look at. I'm looking at all the different teams, all the different matchups, and what teams do when they're trailing versus what they do when they're leading, and the probability of them being ahead or behind.
So are you factoring in with big push and prop bets? Or all right, first of all, Rhys and I talk almost every week, not on here, but during the week when there's a game, how good Vegas is. I mean, like Vegas is scary good on the over/under. I mean, way more than people realize.
Except for the past 2 Browns games, but that's because of weather.
Yeah, but I just meant though, forgot what game it was. It was like 26-10 and the over/under was 45 and a half, 36-10 is 45 and a half or something crazy like that.
Oh, I believe it was the Kansas City Texans game when it was 34-20 and Houston went for 2 instead of going for kicking the 1, and the over/under was 54 and a half.
Right.
So that decision cost bettors millions of dollars.
But are you factoring in prop bets and thinking that Vegas knows something into your equation? You know what I mean? Like, let's pick Metcalf. Will Metcalf get over 65 yards? Do you factor any of that into your equation?
No, so the prop bets aren't efficient. They're not something that has been bet to the right number by the market. But the one misconception about prop bets and Vegas totals and that all those sorts of things is the odds makers median projections. It's a 50th percentile above or below. So they're not trying to project a score. They're not trying to say this game is going to be this or this. We talk about implied team totals, which, it gives you a projected score, but people aren't thinking about the fact that DK Metcalf being projected for 65 yards receiving doesn't mean that they think the most likely outcome is he gets 65 yards. They just know that on the bad games, they're going to be under 65. The good games are going to be over 65. But in reality, maybe it's 100 in the good games and 30 in the bad games. DK Metcalf, maybe not the best example, but especially with the boomer or bust guys, you'll just get no really good perspective of someone's upside when you're looking at things from a medium perspective.
5 years from now, you might be able to, because they may be more efficient, right?
No, still they'll be looking to try and set the median projection because they want 50% of the time it to be low and 50% of the time to be over. So I don't know. I think that a range of outcomes, being able to identify projections without a median perspective, using a mean projection instead, and how guys would do in the ideal situations. Sorry, the puppy just knocked something over, I think.
Awesome.
That's the best way to apply it to DFS, is just thinking about, you can start with the median, and that's a decent spot for like cash games if you're playing just one person one-on-one. But if you're trying to identify upside, you just want the guys that are still going to be passing when they're going to have the lead, those sorts of things.
Or running when they're behind.
Correct. Looking at you,
yeah, I mean, all kinds of weird things that you can identify where it's like, man, why would a team do this? And they do. It's every time you find some little nugget, it's another edge, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, definitely. So, what's a piece of fantasy advice that you give any DFS player this week?
Well, I haven't researched the slate, but I think that we've talked about some key things that every DFS player should be doing. If you're new to DFS, I've talked about stacking. So you want to identify a quarterback and a receiver or 2 receivers on the same team, and then a receiver on the other team. Usually, it doesn't have to be like, if it's a really bad team on the other side and no good receiving options, and don't force it. But if there's a decent receiver coming back, start there, and that's like the base for your lineup. And ideally, that should be from a high-scoring game. And ideally, if you can avoid it, not the popular players. Quarterback, you worry a little bit less about ownership, and you can pivot with receivers like we've talked about with Metcalf and Lockett. Maybe use the guy that's going to be less popular if you're only going to use one, and those sort of things. But don't be contrarian by just making bad plays and playing these bad teams necessarily. Although I'm the guy that like stacked up Jake Luton the other week and had a really nice week. I made, I think, 30,000 from the Jake Luton week.
Oh man, that's a good week.
It's a good week, except I was I needed, let's see, that was the Drake week too. Not Drake, Edmonds week too, and I needed like one touchdown would have been $300,000, but even just
Oh,
like another catch or two would have been six figures. So it's just DFS is so weird, man. At the
oh
end
yeah.
of the slates where you're just dealing with those kind of swings.
Yeah, and it's throw it to this person, but no, not that far. So so
Exactly.
so here's a comic relief question. Are you gonna be gluten free this week?
Oh, good one. uh, Luton is. I don't even know who they're playing this week.
They're
Who are
playing
they
the Steelers.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna be Luton free this week for sure.
Considering what I don't know if Bloom's better than Mayfield, but considering what they did to him,
Yeah, Mayfield's a guy in all fantasy that I think is you want to stay away from because if the Browns are winning, they're running. If they're losing, he's not efficient anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
And he just doesn't have anyone good to pair with either.
Yeah,
Now that Beckham's hurt, because Landry is playing hurt, and so he
right.
just has no upside. And none of the guys in that offense just really are going to have big explosion games. You wouldn't think it would take quite a bit. So I'm with you on that. I think the Browns are generally going to be in a void no matter who they're playing.
Right. Them, the Bears. All I meant is we're at this time of year where we pretty much know who you are. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
so it is what it is.
I think Mayfield gets a second contract with the Browns.
Mm,
Is his contract up this season?
he's got two more, I think.
He was drafted 2018, so he's entering next year would be his fourth year. So it's the
2022.
fifth year option.
2022.
Yes.
It's not gonna matter. He'll be seen for what he is by then.
Let's hope.
Yeah, he would have to turn things around quite a bit to, I think. Although quarterbacks are crazy, where it's like even if you're not that good, there's so few out there anyway that teams will just sign the bad ones and stick with it. But I would think that he's probably gonna have to try elsewhere.
So I put a poll out on Twitter. It went almost 50-50. You tell me which side you get on this. Cam Newton getting a second contract, a multi-year contract after this year
With the Patriots,
with anybody,
anybody multi-year. I'd say no.
That's a hard question.
Yeah, that hurts because I was huge on Cam. I thought he was going to the Patriots the whole time, way long before he signed. And he signed there. I was like, oh, perfect. And he did really well the first couple of weeks. I'm like, yes, I'm a genius. And then he's looked really bad. So it's been a bad investment in season-long leagues.
He's got 3 passing touchdowns this year.
Oh, that's crazy.
But crazy Patriots stat. Jacoby Myers leads the NFL in target share over the last 4 weeks with 41%.
But this gets to his point. If they're not scoring touchdowns, you want to stay away from it in DFS because there's no upside. An MBS with a 5% target share, or whatever it is, might be better off than Jacoby Myers at 50% target share just because you know Rodgers is going to hit the end zone. Jeff, that put words in your mouth accurately there?
Absolutely. If you want to identify the situations where you can project a lot of scoring and there's a lot of volatility in where the Bengals are a great example. If the Bengals were in a situation where they had a really high implied team total because they had this perfect matchup or whatever, and no one wanted to play the Bengals, like, yeah, play the Bengals because there's just so much upside in that. If even if they are volatile and hard to project, if you can nail it, you're gonna have number one. They're usually cheap too. The bad teams, so that's where you play the bad teams.
But to your point, one of my friends did this in a league that we're in, and he got the quarterback and running back stats for the stacks for the Packers and the Saints. And I was thinking about doing that because if you can lock down the Steelers in season long, if you can lock down on those stacks, you'll roughly lock down 85% of the team's fantasy points and touchdowns. If you can lock down 85% of the team of like the Steelers or Cowboys touchdowns,
Maybe.
I'm saying that would be a good strategy.
I think that's a great strategy, and especially for the contests like the best ball contest where they have a playoff round where you advance if you win your league, and then you're in matchups against which essentially it turned into DFS matchups, and your lineups are all of a sudden correlated. And if you can identify with confidence some of those matchups that are going to be good, and so the teams to use in their playoffs, then that's a winning approach. That's exactly what I did with my best ball teams. Is I stacked up different teams and then filled around with guys I was really high on, like Claypool's a good example, McKinnon's a good example, and then some bad ones too, like who was Cam Newton. He's pretty much a miss.
The one game this week that I think is a little fool's gold and everybody will be on is the Raiders Chiefs. Everybody's those division games sometimes don't go as high scoring as people think they will.
Well, that's the thing too, is so the Chiefs will have a really high implied team total, but if they are ahead by a lot, we've seen them now pull the starters twice, I think. And if it's a total blowout, you are not going to want the guys in that contest. And the Chiefs are an example of a team that sometimes you will want when they have a big spread, because they still will pass a decent amount. But there are examples of other teams where when they're ahead, even with the implied team total, if you think that they really are going to win by double digits, you don't want to play those guys. If anything, you want to play the running backs and not the quarterbacks, even if or the passing game, even if that's the better perceived matchup. So a lot to take away from Vegas and what Vegas is trying to tell you.
Yeah, I just meant though in these divisional matchups, sometimes people underappreciate that it may be lower scoring than you expect because the Raiders will play better defense because they think they have a shot at the division, all that stuff. What other questions as we wrap up? Sorry, Jeff, to cut you off there.
No. I was just gonna agree that there are unique aspects to those sorts of things. When you see a team a second time and all that, a lot of people use the just, oh, well, let me look at the box score from the last game, and that's obviously what's going to happen, right? And it's like, well, no, that's what happened. So now the coaches have to adjust to that. It's probably not going to happen this time. So yeah, that's a really good point.
So wrap up question, another situation. Who do you think starts at quarterback? How will that affect for the Cowboys, and how will that affect the fantasy assets for that team?
For DFS, are you even worry about any of the Cowboys?
Nope. I don't even know was it Cooper Rush and some other guy?
Garrett Gilbert and Andy Dalton. Dalton's back.
Oh, Dalton's back. Dalton would be the only guy that I would consider if he was playing, but and even still, it's just such a bad situation because again, it's a team that I'm not going to expect to score points. And I want the teams that are going to score points most of the time, unless I just feel like Vegas is wrong and that there actually is more upside than in this situation. So with the Cowboys, I think too in DFS, maybe I haven't seen the pricing for this week, but I think they're still a little too expensive. So that's the problem, is they're overvalued right now.
Well, talk about overvalued for ESPN projections. They are still paying.
Hey, no, don't be dogging on our buddy Mike Clay now. Don't be throwing those out.
I don't know who does projections for them.
Mike. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, but they still have Zeke projected for almost 17 points on a weekly basis, even though he hasn't hit that this season. He might have hit that once or twice, but
that was when Dak was playing.
Yes.
Yeah, Mike is absolutely one of the best at projections in the industry. So definitely not. None of us are knocking him personally, but
I'm not.
Yeah, I know. That's just not realistic. It's just, especially too with Pollard playing well, it seems like they want to get him a little more involved in. Yeah, it's a really tough thing to adjust for, though. We've adjusted Zeke down quite a bit, but it requires like taking some stands on things like assuming that the Pollard is more involved and that the offense is just going to be less efficient because with Dak, like you guys are kind of hitting at there, they're going to score more. They're going to be able to get first downs. And when drives are just dying, that running back doesn't have as much value.
So Zeke is 1% owned. Not enticing to you at all?
Potentially. It'll all come down to price and stuff as well. But yeah, so there's a chance. That is the kind of guy that you would be you'd have on your list to look into and say, okay, is this a situation where maybe we can expect similar upside? And even if your projection, so like Mike Clay's projection is, I'm guessing it's more of a median projection, although that sounds too high to be a median. It's probably a mean projection then. But even if he's saying that, like, this is what I think he's going to score, he's not saying that that's as much as he can score. Like, he's the ceiling for the guy, the high range of the outcomes could be high enough to make him worth a play.
Right. But 17 in that defense is still only 3 catches, 40 yards on the ground, or a touchdown and 40 yards on the ground. I mean, it's really, we're not talking that big of a game if he's used in the passing game.
The Cowboys were talking about this earlier in the season, like in the preseason before Jarwin got hurt, but there hasn't been any chatter of it since. But they were talking about using a 3 wide receiver, 2 running back type of set where they have 4 wide with Pollard out wide and Zeke in the backfield. Yeah, with Jarwin and Dak out, they apparently don't want to do that, which makes no sense to me.
But that's just Dallas.
So well, it's not just them too, though. It's so many teams have talked about that. Like, oh, we have 2 good running backs. Let's use them both at the same time. And I think the Cardinals said that. I think the Vikings may have as well. It doesn't happen. Like, when it comes down to it, they just never follow through with it. So I don't know if they actually install the packages and just decide not to use them, or if it's just all talk and wanting to keep guys happy on the team. Because people don't realize that when coaches are answering questions, a lot of it is just to keep guys happy on the team. It has nothing to do with the answering the question correctly or anything. It's just managing emotions of players, expectations of players, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially with injuries, right?
Yep.
And to your point, that always, because I put myself in the coach's shoes, all right? It's 1st and 10, middle of the second quarter. I want to go, okay, how can I start my offense? Not how can I get these 2 backs on the field? It's late in the game. I need a big play. All right, what's the best play I have in my book? Not how can I get these 2 backs on the field? I'm trying to draw up the biggest play. I'll tell you, one of the guys I really like this week is Alex Smith. Yes. I think that his volume last week with no touchdowns, paired with Terry McLaurin, may be decent. Just because if you throw for 390, it's not a fluke.
And throw the ball 55 times.
Yeah, against the Bengals, you could have 2 teams there if they decide to both want to pass, which I didn't look at Alex Smith's box score or anything, but if that's what you're saying, then it could be one of those sneaky shootout situations. And Alex Smith, for say what you will about him as a quarterback, but one thing is that when we're talking about quality of targets, like, his completion percentage is actually really good. It's not like Dwayne Haskins where expect a low percentage of those attempts to end up being completions. I want to say it was like 65% his last couple of years. So that could be something that is undervalued and nobody's really going to play, but that could have more upside than you think.
Yeah, I just meant there's a lot of those guys at the quarterback position. Stay away from the Nick Foles and go towards the Alex Smiths. But anyway.
Because with Alex Smith, you have baked in upside. With Foles, you just have a bad offense.
You just have baked in. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. You have any other?
Lauren too.
Yeah, me too, man.
Foles will be baked into the turf by the opposing defensive line, right?
That's a different story. Bears fans will have them baked. But do you have any other questions for Jeff?
Nagy?
Yeah. Do you have any other questions for Jeff? No. I appreciate your time. Take this hour flies by, and we know you're busy taking your one night off, from no sports to help us, talk a little football.
No, it's fun for me, man. I love doing this. Any way I can help is I'm down to do it. So good luck with the podcast and everything. I'm a fan of the book. Good job with the book, and maybe we'll see you in the DFS streets when you're old enough.
When he's old enough to have, facial hair.
Hey, I have a little bit, but y'all
he has almost as much as I am, but that's a difference. That's more of my problem than his. But we appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Thank you for promoting the book.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Have a good one.